Hi, everybody. Welcome to askLRR. My name is Graham, and with me this round is Cameron.
Hello.
And Ian.
I'm your young male child. It's your boy.
My large adult son. And we are here to answer your questions. askLRR, like everything that we do, is brought to you directly by you and your kind support of our Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Or here on the YouTube channel by the YouTube memberships. And indeed, these questions come exclusively from YouTube members. Obviously, it's here for everybody to watch, but if you want to become a YouTube member to ask questions for the askLRR, you can head over to our community page on the channel, and that's where Heather will be posting the monthly Q&A threads. And we switch it up every month. If you haven't seen one of these before, this month it's myself and Cameron and Ian, and we're going to go through a bunch of your pressing questions. So let's get cracking. Mm-hmm. First up, AntiMuffin asks, Graham, that's me, hello. MKBHD, which is a great tech YouTube channel you should check out if you're interested in watching reviews of cool tech, recently did an interview where he compared being a content creator to being an octopus, where you're doing a lot of jobs at once. And he said that hiring people was like cutting off arms, letting other people do things that you used to do yourself. As LRR has grown and changed, which arms have you safely distributed and which ones do you have left? So I love his analogy. I watched that video as well, because he's talking about how he started. Like, you can go way back, and when he's like, I don't know how young he was in his early videos, but he's basically a child, and it's just him in like his mom's living room or whatever, filming stuff initially. And now he's got this amazing studio with like, a huge staff and everything. And so it's, I've briefly fell into the void there. Sorry. I can understand sort of the parallels there. I think the octopus analogy is fairly reasonable. Luckily, even at the very beginning, there was always Paul, who was handling a lot of the more technical focused stuff, like website things early on, and now a lot of the streaming tech. In fact, he's here with us now running askLRR. So luckily, there's that. It's funny. It's like one of the reasons it's been so difficult for me, and I'll admit that it's been difficult for me to lose those appendages, is that most of them I like to do. It's just there's too many of them. Even now I still do a lot of different things. Certainly in this past year, I'd gotten a lot better about about delegating just before lockdown, and then I was like, oh no, now what? I think the biggest thing is probably merchandise. We brought Beej on as a business manager about now I have no concept of time. Some time ago, a couple years ago now, I suppose. And obviously I'm still involved with that, and I talk with Beej about it, and we're like, what are we going to do? What sort of merch thing, what should it look like? Who should we ask to do the art for it? That kind of thing. And then it just occurs, which is great. So it's like, I'm involved in exactly the way I want to be, which is just going, I think it should be this, goodbye. So that's nice. But like editing, I still do a crap ton of editing, which I enjoy very, very much. But thankfully we had a meeting, even last night, about the next pre-release, where it's like, all right, team of editors, who's doing this video, who's doing this video, who's doing that video. And so it's been nice. I think it's I still have the little arms, and so it was less painful to remove the. I'm trying to make this analogy work, and it's not quite getting there.
I think the most apt thing about this analogy that I like is it's an octopus. So it means when you cut off an arm, it regrows, and that means you get to try out new things.
Yeah, we're creating some pretty terrifying Cronenberg sea monsters here.
Mm-hmm.
But we all work together well, and I think that's the important part. All right, next question. Harold Price says, pick a Star Trek series, one actor stays, the rest get replaced by the Muppets. Someone want to start in on this one?
Deep Space Nine.
DS9.
Okay,
Oh
I
my
love that you
God.
both went for Deep Space Nine.
Oh no. Okay. You
Okay,
first,
Ian?
Cam.
Oh, all right.
Okay. You would need to start a couple of seasons in, but I think I'm gonna lay odds on what I think Ian's is gonna be, and I'm gonna go with a different one.
Okay.
Wei-Yun.
Ooh.
And just have Wei-Yun be like, "Ugh, everyone's an idiot except for me. I'm just trying to take over this entire quadrant of the galaxy," and they keep like Wei-Yun's very bad day. I think would be an interesting concept for Star Trek.
That's beautiful, and I love it.
Because I think the probably best answer is Garrick. Right?
Garrick.
Who's also just having a very bad day for a very long time.
Okay, I want to hear
surrounded by
Ian's
idiots.
Ian's Deep Space Nine suggestion, because I also
Garrick's
have a
really
Deep
good
Space Nine
too.
suggestion.
Mine is, let's set the stage as well. So, first episode of Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
The Enterprise is docked at Deep Space Nine, and we open up on Cole Meany receiving his transfer papers, and he's walking off the ship of the Enterprise and on to Deep Space Nine, where every living creature is made of felt. And he just blinks a couple times, looks around, and just keeps going.
Yep.
Yeah, that was also. I was going to start with Next Generation. That is. I know the question was not to go through every series, but when you think of Next Gen, I think one of the obvious answers that would be great is just Next Generation, but retain Patrick Stewart, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on Deep Space Nine, I think Sisko is much better served as a Muppet, and I agree with you that I think Chief O'Brien would be so good on Deep Space Nine, just trying to keep the station together with all these Muppets.
It's a fun question, right? Because it immediately centers one character, but the live action characters in the Muppets aren't necessarily the main character.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're usually the locus of the story in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not the it's always Kermit who's the star. But I think I just really enjoy the weird perspective it would offer, right? Like if you went with TNG and kept Brent Spiner and turned everyone else into Muppets, that implies a lot about how Data sees the world. Right? Like do DS9 and retain Kira, like retain Nana Visitor.
That'd be great too.
Suddenly all of Starfleet and everyone else in the galaxy who isn't a Bajoran is a Muppet, right? And she's just like, I'm trying to explain. I'll try explaining it again. Okay, let's try this.
Like, I think you could cycle through almost everyone in the main cast of the show, and you get like a different, interesting interpretation. I'd also like to see Next Generation with just Worf, like just Michael Dorn, because again, it's like it's all these Muppets and this Klingon.
I mean, then you have to do it with Neelix, which
I
really
had
makes
thought
that
about
show
Neelix.
strange.
When I was thinking about Voyager, I was like, who would you do in Voyager? Would it be Neelix? I don't know.
7 of 9?
7 maybe? Maybe Harry Kim.
I just really do want to see a Chakotay puppet.
I think it would have to be Harry Kim, because he actually has that kind of very put upon, semi-ineffectual character. He reminds me a lot of Scooter, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
But a human Scooter.
Wow. Wow. Does Harry Kim's uncle own Starfleet?
I just watched the other day. Rewatched. I don't remember when I would have seen it originally, but the first episode of the Muppet Show, when everyone is like, everyone's still. It's very rough around the edges, like early Simpsons, right? When it's like,
right.
Everyone's not quite on on Style Guide yet.
Who is this
right?
character? Still just feeling out the edges.
Yeah, Miss Piggy looks particularly disturbing.
Ooh.
And it's just sort of like, is that Miss Piggy or is that a different pig? What's going on here? And and that's the episode, where Scooter is like, yeah, we should get my dog in the show. It's my uncle's favorite pet. Oh, okay. Yeah, my uncle who owns the theater. And Kermit's like, oh, great, sure, fine, go ahead. It's what an odd show. You know what? So this is a brief aside. It was bugging me, so I had to look it up. And indeed, there was no live audience at any point in the Muppet Show.
Okay.
They didn't even air the edited. They didn't even like film it and then air the edited versions for a live audience. It's pure laugh track, and it's just like, wow. And I thought this was a really interesting quote from Jim Henson. Was that he put a special together, one of their Muppet specials, and put it together and didn't have the laugh track, and was pretty upset that adding the laugh track notably made it funnier.
Oh,
He was like, it bothers me that this works. It was one of those things.
Right. Well, I mean, like, I guess in a show that's as much about artifice as the Muppet Show is, right? Having even the audience be a construct.
Yeah.
Says something. I could write a paper.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. What a great question that was, by the way. Sean Riley says, what other British show concepts, like Taskmaster, should we expect to see paid homage to in the future? That's a great question. I don't know. What's funny is I had barely watched any Taskmaster when we filmed the Askmaster sequence, but it's such a compelling concept that I was like, no, we should definitely do this. Actually, the funnier thing is the participants. Ian you've watched a fair chunk of Taskmaster.
It was a single season that I'd come off of when I actually suggested the concept, and it was just because it seemed like this is something we could put together quite easily.
Yeah. Alex and Serge, I think, had never heard of it. Kathleen had watched maybe half an episode over my shoulder, and I don't recall Beej's exposure to the show or not, but I just think it was kind of funny because you don't need to know the show. The point is, right? You can just do it. I suppose perhaps Alex never having seen it before is why he interpreted it so literally. But I was very clear, right? I mean, there was all this is an aside, but there was all the different GoPros, right? And I told every person, I'm setting up a bunch of cameras around the office. Don't worry about that. You are not required or obliged to go to places that I have put cameras. But that does suggest that you can. Right. So, there's sort of an inbuilt hint there. I just didn't want people to be like, oh, he put a camera in the prop room. I need to go in. Most people actually didn't know I had a camera in the prop room. So
you can't explicitly tell people, hey, bend the rules, because then people just go right off the rails.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I don't know, actually.
Plenty I'd like to do. I mean, we already have one, and that's Tinker Tailor Soldier Fry, which is, in fact, a direct reference to James May's Reassembler series.
Oh, right.
Part of the inspiration for that.
The UK and Japan just have better television. Well, you mentioned artifice about the Muppet Show thing. There's so much artifice on American reality. Not reality TV is the wrong kind of thing. Like, obviously for the dramatic reality shows, obviously there is, but even for stuff like The Masked Singer or things like that, like there's so much. Everything is very particularly crafted. I watched an episode because I'd never actually seen this until the comments on Taskmaster were like, "What's next? Loading Ready Run does 8 of 10 cats does countdown." And I know that James had been watching it, and so I watched an episode of 8 of 10 Cats Does Countdown. It's just people fucking around for an hour, and it's like you would never get this greenlit on North American television. They are terrified at the prospect of just allowing funny people to be funny and having faith that will be entertaining. Everything has to be meticulously planned, and it is to the detriment of their television. So I think that's why we're sort of drawn to to media from other continents in that way. But I can't think of a specific UK TV series that I'm like champing at the bit to do.
Well, yeah, like I wanted to talk about this question because like I basically agree with you that we draw on kind of a rich tradition of English, um, kind of lumpy human beings being entertaining for you
Yeah.
without a lot of structure, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's the Pythons or whether it's Top Gear
Mhm.
or yeah, or the tradition of the quiz show or panel show. And it's weird to think of something that started as in like the 70s as a tradition, but
Yeah.
here we are, right? Um, I don't know. I just like the unstructured um, uh, and unvarnished feeling of English television.
Mhm. And it extends to like I think that some of the better stuff on North American TV in that sort of in that live air quotes unscripted realm is the late night shows, and even then
Mm.
on those are um so much more regimented than they are in the UK, where Graham Norton literally gets people soused.
It probably has
Yeah.
a lot to do with the ideals of American individualism
Mm.
Well,
and
and I
the
also
idea of the
realize I
host.
referred to Top Gear as like, you know, a rough around the edges series when it's probably one of the most slickly produced television series that, you know, a global empire has ever produced.
Yeah.
But again, putting all of that effort into making it feel like it's just still a little bit rough around the edges, but in a
Hmm.
very contained way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have any specific answer, but it's I guess that's a thesis as to why we keep doing that sort of thing. Next up, Daniel White asks, when it's possible again, I'd like to visit Canada, partly inspired by the beautiful scenery in Road Quest. What are the top 3 Canadian things I should see or experience on my trip? So here's the thing: is that I haven't actually seen a lot of Canada myself. I've been I've driven as far west as or as far east, pardon me. I've driven as far east as eastern Alberta, and then I've also visited Toronto. And that's about it, right? So I can very strongly recommend the Rockies, right? Like the Rocky Mountains, probably the Icefields Parkway, that particular drive in the Rocky Mountains, if I had to be really specific about it, is stunning. Like that's an area like we didn't on Road Quest, we didn't go through the Rockies. We went up the Coast Mountain Range, uh, and that's just like there's a reason that people come from all over the world to cram onto tour buses and go up the Rocky Mountains. But that's the only thing that I can sort of like recommend in particular. I think that honestly, I think that Vancouver and Victoria in this realm, as a tourist, I think that this area is also particularly gorgeous. And someone who doesn't, for someone who hasn't grown up having to do this particular trip out of necessity, the ferry ride from Vancouver to Victoria is very, very pretty. I understand Montreal is very nice.
There are parts of Ottawa that I really enjoyed when I visited.
Yeah, I really liked Ottawa a lot. I've I've only been about as far east as Ottawa,
Hmm.
which is still, and this is important to remember, central Canada,
Yes.
right? We living out here in British Columbia think of, you know, central Canada as being like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, but that's like half the country, barely,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ontario and Quebec are central Canada because that's where our economic and population kind of centers of gravity are. Uh, but actually dealing with the question, um, I live here and it's hard for me to like see it from the interior. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You when you live in a place, it's hard to think of like, oh, you know, what's particularly pretty because it's a very pretty country, and it depends kind of what you're into. I really recommend like Lake Louise or Jasper
Yeah.
in the Rockies as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Jasper's
I
great. Jasper's
grew up,
like a smaller, less aggressively tourist focused Banff.
yes. Um, the mountains are spectacular. The coastal rainforest are spectacular. Even, God, like the prairies. If you've never seen a prairie storm, I highly recommend finding a prairie storm, like a lightning storm, and just sitting in the middle of it.
Ooh.
Because that's a hell of a thing. And it depends what you're into. It's a big country. We do a lot of things very well. If you want to see the aurora, we have that. If you want to do a desert badlands, we have that. It even has dinosaurs.
A lot of them.
Asterisk. The going to the chateau in Quebec, the Chateau Frontenac, is super cool. Yeah, I don't know. It depends what you're into, but odds are we have it.
I actually wanted to take this question and turn it in a different direction. We've been talking a lot about natural formations and the natural beauty of Canada.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I mean, what are the things I should see or experience on my trip that are Canadian? Well, what's one of the things that's almost uniquely Canadian? If you can, find yourself an outdoor hockey game to go see.
Oh, yeah.
NHL
Yeah.
or otherwise, but I don't think there's anything more quintessentially... This is not a personal endorsement. I don't like hockey or the outdoors, but I understand that it is a cultural experience.
I love that. I appreciate that suggestion too. Like, look, I don't like hockey or the outdoors or wooden sticks or people, but you know,
It's extremely popular for a reason, so...
yeah.
I mean, going to a sporting event is kind of cool. I don't sports very often, but even just being in a bar with a bunch of people watching a playoff game, there's a kind of an undeniable energy to it.
One of the things I'm sad that I haven't done in my 2 trips to Japan that I intend to rectify whenever I get back there is going to a baseball game. I could not give less of a shit about baseball. Do not care. But apparently, Japanese baseball games are just a blast. Like people just apparently just like the crowd and everything is just like it's a whole thing. Also, ideally, I get to support a team called the Ham Fighters.
Yes. The Nippon
Hell yeah.
Ham Fighters.
Sorry, the Nippon Ham Fighters.
Okay.
But they're the Nippon Ham is the team sponsor. So they're the
Right,
Nippon
right.
Ham Fighters, but when you write it down, it's the Nippon Ham Fighters. Anyway, do not underestimate also the size of Canada.
Yes.
We've suggested things that are thousands of kilometers away from one another. You cannot, as a friend of a friend once, her parents were coming to visit from England, I think it was. That's generally the problem when someone comes to visit from Europe, and they were like, "Well, we'll come visit you in Victoria. We'll do like an afternoon in Toronto." And it's like, nah, you check the legend on that map you're looking at.
You are doing an afternoon in Toronto while you have breakfast in Victoria. That's how time zones work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you will. It is flying from London to Toronto is a shorter distance than flying from Toronto to Victoria.
That's a good point.
And you get to fly over second London.
Yeah. All right, we've got a couple of different questions from Mr. Twansel here. The first one for me is, Graham, how did it come to pass that you and Beej started doing mail time? I honestly don't remember, because I was doing mail time as like an insert in loading time, which was like our just behind the scenes thing, and then it got too much, and so we spun it out into its own thing. And then I think it was just like, Beej is around, like reliably. How about you sit in with me, and then it can be 2 of us, and we'll be able to do a banter. That'll be better. And then it was just like, yep, that's me and Beej. I honestly don't know if there was more to it than that. Could not tell you, but that's how it is. So perhaps an unsatisfactory answer, but there you go. Mr. Twansel has another question for Cameron and Ian, which is, how did your post-Christmas stream of quietly enjoying a book happen?
Well, I think a Cameron and Ian Christmas was Ian's suggestion. And did it happen the same year that Nick Offerman did his?
I believe it did, actually.
Like, it was like lightning striking twice.
Yeah. It just seemed like a good idea to do, and we kept doing it.
Yeah. And then one year I brought a book, and I enjoyed reading a book on it because it seemed like the correct energy for that kind of experience. But Ian does not. Ian is a man of singular focus.
It's I find it an amazingly meditative experience.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that weirds me out is people refer to it as disapproving dads, and it's just like a neutral expression that we have,
I think
right?
that says more about them than it does about you.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what do you read into somebody just sitting like
You
quietly
you
enjoying
can't
a
be held
beverage?
responsible for somebody else's Kuleshov effect if they look at a
Yeah,
neutral
right.
if they look
Exactly.
at a
Yeah.
neutral expression on a man and go, that man's disappointed in me.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you're disappointed in you.
Somebody needs a drink, and it's not the people in the camera.
Mr. Twanzel also asks, does LRR provide lunch for those working that day? And if yes, what are the most popular choices? So I thought this would be interesting to talk about. So do we provide lunch? Generally not, because, mostly it's just everyone eats at different times and it's not consistent when people are around. On Loading Ready live days when we were all in the office, because that's like everyone shows up here and works straight through.
Mhm.
Then on days like that, or if we're doing a particularly involved shoot, then then the company will do lunch for that. But I thought this would be more interesting as an answer of like what sort of things we like for lunch. uh
um,
yeah.
yeah, the loading ready lunches that I generally enjoy the most are there's like a totally fine burrito place,
Hmm.
Mexican place that we order in from. And they're great for when you just want a log of food,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Dense.
The burritos from La Taquisa are, that they have a lot of vegetarian variety, which counts a lot for me.
Hmm. There's three different Mexican places fairly close, like physically fairly close to one another. Actually, I think Taco Fino might have moved, but anyway,
Mhm.
and they all, honestly, I like all three of them. I think they all do different things very, very well.
Mhm.
Um, but everything from La Taqueria, which is mostly the small tacos, is small and impossibly messy, like way messier than something of that size should be. Delicious,
Yeah.
but weird. And then the all you can get really from Taco Fino, despite the name, not all you can get, but generally what you get from Taco Fino is the burritos that are the size and density of a white dwarf star.
Hmm.
So we go for the other option that has more variety, I think, and so everyone can sort of get the
Mhm.
the arrangement of Mexican food that they desire.
I'm gonna jump off the Mexican train here actually for a second because I want to talk a bit about Fujiya that we go to
Mm.
sometimes, and I think that's actually shown up on stream. There's
Mhm.
a great Japanese grocer in town that has trays your trays of sushi or your trays of salad, tonkatsu bowls. But my favorite thing from them is this $6 bento set that
Mm.
comes with a rice ball, two pieces of chicken, a small salad, some pieces of fish cake, two pieces of California roll sushi, pickles. It's everything you want for very low cost, and I look forward to those days actually when we get them for lunch.
So
Yeah, the vet.
oh,
Oh,
sorry, Cam, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Graham.
All right. I'm gonna Kool-Aid man through the wall here with a hot take, Ian, which is that and I think I've mentioned this before. I think that Sakura grocery,
Hmm.
uh I don't know if it's because of the volume that Fujiya has to deal with in these days, but Sakura groceries sushi like pre-made sushi fridge it's just better. Their quality, the quality of like their onigiri 1-to-1, Sakura
Hmm.
no question.
I completely agree on that,
Oh.
but
All
everything
right.
in one bento is really great, Graham.
That's fair. That's fair. They do. I think you can order bentos from Sakura. I think, who, by the way, just opened an offshoot down on Lower Johnson called Oni Onigiri
Ooh.
because it's like a Oni, the devil, right? So it's like
Mhm.
devil onigiri, where it's just. I think it's like an onigiri stand.
It's
Anyway,
gonna be very good stuff.
yeah, yeah, I'm excited about that. Sorry, Cam, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say that Fujiya's veggie bento also very good.
Mm,
A
hmm.
couple of spring rolls, I think a cucumber roll, rice, pickles. Recommended.
Yeah. There's also a place we go to reasonably frequently called Bold Butchery, which is it's a butcher shop, but they do lunches as well, and they do a shawarma wrap. And they recently, I say recently, it was probably over a year ago, they introduced a poutine. So it's just this enormous pile of fries, correctly cheese curds, a delicious gravy that they make, and you can get it with the chicken that they do. It's very good.
I have a feeling this is not going to be the last time we mention Bold Butchery today.
Yeah, their falafel is really good. It's very herbaceous.
Mm-hmm.
That's drawing down.
Yeah, easily. Question from Elaster93 says, is there a game developer, bonus points for any small indie firm, that you would buy a new game from sight unseen? Ian.
Yeah, I just like talking about this question because I've been thinking about it recently because of the games that I've been playing. And the two games that I'm playing the most of are from studios that I would give money to sight unseen. Bungie, I mean, although now you don't have to give them money sight unseen all the time, but that would have been the number one question.
Yeah.
Now it's Ryuga Gotoku Studios. I think I've played enough of their games, the people behind the Yakuza series.
Ah, that makes sense.
And the spin-offs, which are also still just great story character pieces with spread of emotional range. I've never had a disappointing time with a Ryuga Gotoku game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I only just started dipping my toe in with Yakuza 0, and what an odd game. A wonderful, very odd game.
Nothing else like it.
No, it's like you're a hard-bitten Yakuza underling who gets, framed or whatever for something, and you have to fight your way back in. But before you do all of that,
there's 18 hours of everything else that you can possibly do, including property management, hostess club activities, playing video games,
karaoke,
small
dancing,
engine repair,
miniature car circuit track racing.
It's like an ITT Tech ad from the 80s.
Yeah.
Get your degree in.
Get your degree in helping someone shut down a ring of panty sellers. They don't take much convincing. It's like, you shouldn't do this. What would your parents think?
Deprogram people from cults.
Yeah, that one. That was a weird one.
Yep.
Beat up enormous men.
And all these things with a light attitude.
Oh yeah, it's all very, very light. It's super fun. Highly recommend. Why can't I remember the name of it? What's the company what made Hades?
Oh,
Supergiant.
Supergiant. Everything Supergiant makes is pretty great.
Yeah. Hard to say no to any of their titles. I was trying to think of all of the indie games that I've really enjoyed in the last few years, and then looking through their back catalog to find out what else they have made, and if there's anyone I would buy games from sight unseen. And the closest I came was the developer of Heaven's Vault, Inkle. But they've also done a bunch of other games where I'm just like, I don't know if this is for me, right? So unfortunately, but I don't know if there's any indie developers that always get my money. But FromSoft is probably a large studio that I'm probably going to buy their games every time.
Tracks.
Bungie as well.
Yeah, agreed. Everything that Yacht Club Games has made I've enjoyed, but it's just Shovel Knight and all ancillary Shovel Knight productions. They've all been great, but it's just Shovel Knight.
I'm probably going to buy games from Team Cherry. Right? Hollow Knight was really good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to Silksong. But that's kind of their catalog. What about Brain, 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 brain,
Brain.
brain. Um, they made Wargame and Eugen Studios.
Eugen.
Yeah,
We-
they make RTSs kind of that are
Ah.
extremely anorak. Like if you're a tank watcher, right, you're gonna these are for deep nerds who care about like the penetration value on a British 17-pounder tank cannon. Like there's
Excellent.
no way that would have hit, right? Yet
Right.
it did. Yet it
RTS, where the
did.
S is heavy simulation.
Yeah. You know, if you care very much for what the loitering time is for a de Havilland Mosquito over the battlefield, then these are the games for you.
Ah, de Havilland. Great. All right. Moving on. You all, this is from Thomas Heaterman. You are all pretty familiar with tabletop role-playing games. Are there any settings that you find incredibly interesting or fun to play in? What about any homebrew settings that you have created or played in? Cameron, I think.
I really, really want to play in Eclipse Phase.
Oh, yeah. You've been
Which
talking about
is-
Eclipse Phase for years.
Yeah, Eclipse Phase, if you're not familiar with it, is a post-apocalyptic science fiction setting set in, you know, it's a spacefaring human civilization that is, you know, distributed throughout the solar system and has recently barely won a war against its rogue AIs.
Oh, good.
We survived. And it's not entirely clear whether we actually won the war or whether the AIs, they're called Titans, just decided to leave.
Mm.
Don't love that.
Yeah. And
That's
so
worrying.
there's fewer than 1 billion humans left alive
Ooh.
in the solar system. Humanity, like the former human states don't exist anymore. Earth is an uninhabitable wasteland. And its kind of catchphrase is like, you know, your body is meat, change it. The But the last line is like, extinction is coming,
Mm.
right? So how do you deal with the fact that like this could be the last days of humanity, or it could be the first days of humanity? And you're supposed to be playing agents of an organization called Firewall, but you don't have to. And it's just this wonderfully weird setting of like there's a space state. You can re-sleeve your body kind of arbitrarily often.
Oh, don't say
if
that.
you don't like who you are, you can just change it. And there is one human out there who is a giant space station made out of meat as a living art project. And they have a very long name, but I forget what their name is now. And I just enjoyed that as a concept, right? And it's like, no, this is going to be my body. I'm a living art project. You can come and live inside me.
Yeah.
They're
right,
described
all
as
right.
having
Sure.
the texture of flank steak.
I do love ludicrous sci-fi like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I
Sweet.
think that's an answer I would have to give as well. I've been eyeing the Lancer system for a while as an option to co-opt that and place it in a few of my favorite pre-existing worlds. But we'll see if that how that comes about.
Lancer does look really cool. I should give that book a go.
All right.
Thanks, Itch Bundles.
Next question from Thomas Putney is to Graham. Any advice for leading a group, creatives or otherwise? I don't know that I have any advice. Like, I don't know if this is advice.
You can't tell me what to do, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know if I'm in the right person to dispense advice on this kind of thing. But I can tell you that one of the things that I always try to do is to I try, despite the fact that there is obviously like editorial sign off on most of what we do, right? Like there's like an editor in chief aspect where it's like you know, like well, no, okay, I'm gonna sort of rephrase that. I think it's important that everybody gets to participate and make things that they like. And often I will sort of steer it, be like, take this, try to take just an unbound creative idea and be like, that's awesome. How do we do that? How do we make that? How do we make your idea come to life? Right? Because right now that's a concept that is, unfilmable or is just like a cool concept. How do we crystallize that and make it be a thing? But something that's come up during like Loading Ready Live things, for example, is sometimes when we're having those meetings is that it's been less recently, but I will ask, like, can you explain can you explain this to me? It's not a requirement that I find a thing funny. I just want to understand why the person whose idea this is finds it funny, right? And if it's like, okay, I understand why you find that funny, great, let's do it, right? Because if it's like, okay, I had this great idea, and it's like, why? And they can't articulate that, then I have trouble sort of getting on board. But even if I don't personally find it funny, that's okay, because comedy is very subjective, and I like to think that we present a consistent but varied platter of comedy to you. As long as I can understand why that person thinks it's funny, then that's enough, And I think Ian in particular has had a lot of very fascinating suggestions on episodes of Loading Ready Live. To be fair, I was completely on board for the cat ass suggestion. That was not something that needed defending.
That needed a lot of explaining, but not necessarily
defending. But not defending. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's really, if you don't want your team to have input and to bring their own thing to the table, then why do you have a team? Right? Like if I didn't get joy from all of the creative suggestions that everybody else brings to the table, then I should just, I don't know, hire editors to do exactly what I say. Right? That's not the point. That's never been the point, right? Like I have a lot of ideas, and I desperately want to get all those ideas out of there. But a lot of the time, I think it's important to just act as a conduit for other people's ideas, to be like, I totally see what this idea is, and let's now figure out how to make that happen. Because we're very collaborative. I try to be very collaborative, and obviously there's points where where it's like, at some point someone has to be like, okay, this doesn't work, or we need to try and do it this way. And maybe that's not always even the best way to do it, which is fair. But I think that it's important to you just got to respect everybody. That's I guess the advice. Just respect other people, because otherwise you're not. Otherwise, it's not a group. It's just like it's just like you and some peons, which was never something I'm interested in doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always feel supported and respected here. So that's,
I'm very encouraged to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's not a thing I can say about a lot of employment opportunities I've had, or a lot of places where I've worked.
I feel the same way.
So, yeah, no, I really appreciate that leadership style. Honestly, it's great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Leaders to me have been people who get problems out of the way of the people doing the work, and you've done an admirable job in that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Now, there was a follow-up question, an unrelated follow-up question from the same person that said, to Ian, I think you would appreciate this recent rhythm gem from Newgrounds, with a link to a game on Newgrounds, which obviously we can't
No, can't show that. But I
Do
do
in
want to
here.
let them know that I did have a look at it. It's a great game. You'll probably see it on Rhythm Cafe. And if anyone out there has suggestions for rhythm games, check a Rhythm Cafe VOD on YouTube, and there's a link to suggest games for us there.
Ah,
Just wanted to let the people at home know about that. Through
Excellent.
different-
I mean, this is half a troll suggestion, but I'd love to see you take on Sekiro as a rhythm game, because it actually does provide those cues for you, right? The
Really?
interface is like, this is what is coming up, and this is when you hit the parry button.
huh.
Huh.
And it's
I
much
haven't-
more explicit about that than any of the other Souls.
Than like Dark Souls.
I haven't
Yeah.
played Sekiro yet, but it's on the list, so yeah, that sounds like that might
Just-
be a fun thing
If,
to do.
if you've got a blank space, right?
Thomas continues, Cameron, I really appreciate your dark comedy. Do you and the others have any favorite pieces of black humor?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like my parents actually introduced me to a lot of very black comedies when I was probably too young for some of them.
Mm.
But they are tickled by these, and so I kind of grew up being fascinated by them. I remember watching The Fisher King with my parents when I was very young, and that is like Terry Gilliam is a garbage man, unfortunately, but The Fisher King has a lot of resonance for me, and I cribbed heavily from it for First Law, and that is a movie that with like Robin Williams, and it begins and it has a massacre as its centerpiece, but it's also like very funny and touching. Then like I watched Catch-22 as well when I was quite young, and that's a very black comedy about how you navigate being in a war. And the book is great. If you haven't read the book, I really recommend the book. Even the new miniseries I thought was actually surprisingly good, especially the way it chose to end. Kurt Vonnegut's novels are like another example of very good, not always black comedy, but when he did them, they were very effective. And like, I guess the question here is like, what is a black comedy? And a black comedy is something that deals with upsetting or disturbing material, but does it with kind of like a laugh. And that sounds awful, right? It's like, you don't, you want to treat material seriously.
Yeah.
But there are some instances where you can treat it honestly as an absurdity, right? I think the Pythons did that very well.
Yes, actually, there's a lot of Python sketches I would classify in that sort of realm. Certainly dark humor. I don't mind dark humor. I find one of my first introductions to like a movie that was explicitly like, this is black comedy was God, what's it called? Very Bad Things. And
right, yeah, I've heard very bad things about that.
I did not enjoy it. Everyone I was watching it with was falling about laughing, Bill especially. But then, of course, that was the kind of person Bill was. It was just I found it very upsetting. It was very uncomfortable. It was a comedy, but everything that it wasn't played for laughs. It was you were just watching a series of awful things happen to people. And then like the conclusion of the movie was like, and everything turned out terribly. Ha ha. And I was just like, I didn't enjoy that. That's not, and so that sort of put me off the notion for a while. But
right.
Things like the, I guess ostensibly it's a sketch series, but things like the League of Gentlemen, again from the UK, that's definitely like dark comedy that I quite enjoy, more so for like individual moments and the overall structure of League of Gentlemen. I love the structure of League of Gentlemen, which was actually, I don't know if you ever saw Death Comes to Town, but that was a more recent thing where the Kids in the Hall basically did a season of the League of Gentlemen. It was kind of amazing. Wow. It was like, oh, you also watched League of Gentlemen. I see. So that's sort of more in the realm that I exist in. I don't find it funny or interesting to just watch a bunch of awful things happen.
Yeah, right. And that's a very fine line about black comedies, is that
Hmm.
they need to actually have a point
I
in
Yeah,
order to
yeah.
land IMO, right? That there needs to be a humanity that actually carries through um,
yeah.
the cruelty. Otherwise, it's just cruelty for the sake of being cruel,
I
which
think
I don't enjoy. Um, and that's what Vonnegut did so well, is that, you know, his characters are all vulnerable and wonderful and caring people who just have, you know, this is just their life, right? Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time and has to, like, flash back and forth between all these horrible events in his life, and that's relatable. Um, but more recently, I think my favorite have been like, or was the death of Stalin.
ooh, that was very fun.
Yeah, which is a madcap comedy about the civil and political unrest following the death of the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin.
I'm really glad you gave that definition off the top, though, Cam, because it made me just start to re-examine what I consider a black comedy.
Mhm.
And because I didn't have an answer off the top of my head for this question, and suddenly now I'm clicking, oh yeah, no, a lot of what I actually enjoy from Japanese media does qualify under the black comedy. Like most of the works of Ikuhara, I would call the Shoujo Kagame Utena, specifically Mawaru Penguin Drum, would definitely qualify as a black comedy, and they're some of my favorite works film-wise. Save the Green Planet, which is a just a weird live-action examination of a man who
Yeah.
thinks he may or may not be an alien. Is and it, yeah, I happen to like Japanese black comedies now that I know they exist.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right. Next question from Noam Popper says, "Why are references funny?" Because we like
Because
things we remember.
yeah, because you get out of them what you put into them. They're references and they're very personal,
Hmm.
right? Um, you can kind of project whatever you need onto a reference, and that makes it enjoyable for you and you specifically, and it feels private or like a shared experience.
Yes.
And they're very kind of, I don't want to say low effort, because drawing lines between things is one of my favorite activities, right? Making those connections and finding the would it be homologous structures in various parts, the pieces of your life where things line up in unexpected ways,
Mhm.
right? That can be very rewarding, right? Like, oh, this reminds me of this, this reminds me of this. um Less so when it's just like, hey, meme. um
Yeah, when you get the I mean, Paul and I have been complaining for years about that, the run of the movies,
yes.
which are just like there's no joke. It's just like it's look, it's Michael Jackson. Ah, and it's like that's not no,
Yeah.
that's just a reference. You're not doing anything with the reference.
Mhm.
There was no setup. There was no payoff. It's just like look, it's thing. That's not
Yes.
funny. Yeah.
It's
So
like
transgressive.
where
um
it's
Go
where,
ahead.
thank you. Where does the line come down between illusion and sparkling reference? Is it just a matter of time, or is it a
Mhm.
is there what needs to go in there to make it literally valid? I guess.
By the way, referring to anything as sparkling something is still one of my favorite. I use that whenever I can.
Yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
it's one of my current favorites as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, four little words. Why are references funny? And I could write a PhD thesis on it, right? Like, yeah, they're short answer. They're funny because they allow the listener to do all the heavy lifting, and I love that. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh God, chew on this for 30 seconds while I think of a joke. Um,
Yeah. I mean, they're whatever you may think of the show as a whole, there have been some uh, there've been some very good individual moments on Family Guy, and that's the one that it reminds me of. Was I don't even remember what they were referencing, but it was like interviewing someone in an old folks home and talking, I don't know, maybe it was like MASH or something, but it was just like, it was the entire clip was just someone going, I enjoy things I remember. And that was it. Right. And it's like, it's like, yeah. All right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. It's like Darmok and Gelada Tanagra, dude. Yeah. I don't need any more than that. It's a thing I recognize, and it makes me feel good to be in a space that's familiar to me.
His arms wide. Let us go now to our last question for this episode of askLRR from Daniel White. What's the best burger you've ever eaten?
Homemade.
Oh.
Hand chopped leftover prime rib.
Wow.
Just double-handed, double knife, tuckada, formed into patties, then placed in a sous vide machine for, I want to say, 4 hours at 55 degrees centigrade, taken out, patted dry, then deep fried to add a crisp outer coating to the burger patty itself. Brioche bun, butter, lettuce, tomato, some form of sauce, maybe dollop of barbecue sauce. At that point, it's all about, and of course, a slice of, what was that, Swiss? Yes, it was Swiss at the time.
That sounds amazing.
I haven't recreated it yet, and it's still up here.
Wow. We're very, mine's not going to be as good because mine's not homemade. We're spoiled for choice here in Victoria. We're very lucky. We have a bunch of particularly good burger places. I've got two different burger philosophies, or two different philosophies of burger, because I think like we have very fancy burger places, and we have just like places where you can get a burger. And honestly, one of the best burgers I think we have in town is from a place called Big Wheel, and they just make burgers. They're just like, it puts me in the mind of like what McDonald's was like when it opened, that kind of burger, right? And it's just they have very good buns, and they're good burgers, and the sauce is tasty, and it's just like just a cheeseburger from Big Wheel is like, if you have this, like I want a burger, and it's like, yes, that is what that is. And it's good. And then on the other end of things, we have a couple places. We have Pink Bicycle and Bin 4, which do very fancy burgers, and the buns at Pink Bike are amazing. But I honestly, probably one of the best burgers I've ever had from Bin 4, where it's where we used to do the pre-release, like after dinner things, was they always have these feature burgers, and they had like a Thanksgiving burger.
Oh, yeah.
It was a turkey burger, but there was like cranberry and stuffing on it, and it might sound weird, but just the flavor combination they put together was one of the best hamburgers I've ever had. And it's mostly anything from Bin 4 is going to be great, but that was a particularly good one.
I actually completely misread this question as, what is the biggest burger you've ever eaten? And I was going to answer with the story of the Sixer, which is not even that impressive, but it's the kind of thing you do when you're 19 and you think that you're impressive.
It has a name, though.
Yeah, which was you go to Burger King and you order a double Whopper with 4 extra patties with cheese and bacon between each one. And this was kind of like a rite of passage among friends of mine who initiated me into it. And I got it without mayonnaise because mayonnaise is gross. And in solidarity, the friends who were like, you have to, if you're going to be friends with us, you have to do this before we can go and watch like Gundam Wing. They also partook of their Sixers, and I remember after ordering it, they put in their orders, and I heard the guy in the kitchen yell, "There's another one!" And this was not the best burger I've ever eaten, but I did eat it.
Oof.
And I think that counts for something.
When we used to play D&D in high school, we lived a not inconsiderable walk. Not we lived. The place where we played D&D was a not inconsiderable walk from a McDonald's, which would have their like 50-cent cheeseburger deals at the time. And we would have like impossibly long D&D sessions because we had nothing else to do. And so we'd, at like 5 p.m. or 6, be like, oh, all right, they got the cheeseburger special on right now. Let's take a dinner break. And we go down to McDonald's. And like, I know this guy, Alan, that I played D&D with, was like, all right, I'll have 22 cheeseburgers.
Yep. Yeah. Like,
just
doing that at a LAN party, right? When somebody is like, oh, 1 a.m. Wendy's closes in an hour. Everyone get your JBC orders in. And we thought that was like a normal thing to do, right? It's just you show up at Wendy's in their drive-thru and order 36 junior bacon cheeseburgers, 5 without mayonnaise because mayonnaise is gross. And you assume for some reason that they aren't all spat in because it's just too much spit. You would die. But also, yeah, having done the McDonald's thing. But instead of D&D, it was when a friend and I were watching Twin Peaks.
That's a lot cooler. Amazing. Oh, boy.
But yeah, like the McDonald's 50-cent cheeseburgers were responsible for like fueling a lot of teenage boys.
Yeah.
Right? You're just shoving 50-cent hamburgers into the bottomless gut of a 16-year-old, like a stoker shoveling coal into the furnace of HMS Duke of Iron or Iron Duke at the Battle of Jutland.
Oh boy!
Trickle of cheese runs out of the hopper,
out of your tear ducts.
I didn't know what a sixer was, and I'm kind of sad that I do now.
They're not good. No, they're not good. It's not a good. That animal was not honored.
Well, hopefully we have honored these questions with our answers. Thanks everybody for submitting questions. Again, if you'd like to submit a question for future askLR, you can do so if you are a YouTube member, but it's not a requirement, obviously. Please do follow the channel though if you're watching and aren't already following, and you can also support us on our Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. But that is going to do it for this episode of askLR. Until next time, for Cameron.
Bye.
And Ian.
Toodles.
And Paul on the tech. And Heather who gets these online. I've been Graham. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye.